Yep. All right. Hey guys, we're so sorry about that. This is our first time using the live feature on YouTube, and our computer was not liking it at all. So I'm so sorry we kept you guys waiting. But we're here now. Can everybody hear us okay? Do you have your mic?
I do.
Yep.
I'm mic'd in. Looks like you've plugged me in.
Yep, okay. Let me see if I can get someone to verify.
Can hear 5 by 5. All right, that's great news.
Okay, good. Okay. Okay, so hey guys, we wanted to do this live video. We've been getting a lot of the same questions by some of the wholly owned pilots. So when I say wholly owned, I'm talking about Piedmont, PSA, Envoy. So we thought, why don't we do a video and kind of get the information out there for everyone to see. I know a lot of you have different schedules. We're working with different time zones, different availability. So we thought we would just streamline the process for you guys, try and get some answers for you. If you have any questions, put them in the chat and we'll answer them to the best of our ability. So yeah.
Hey, and we're most certainly glad that you guys are here. Thanks for chiming in and getting a little bit of information, learning with us. And we hope to be able to do videos like this occasionally, just to put information out there to make sure that the right information gets out there instead of the rumor mill just getting circulated around and around as it does every day on the line.
Yeah, so talking about rumors. So I think what Heath and I have seen a lot of, not just lately, but I think historically when it comes to the regionals, pilots tend to make emotional decisions instead of logical decisions when it comes to your career sometimes. And you really need to be careful when you're thinking about making a career move, and even just in life in general. Heath and I have conversations and we say, okay, am I responding in a logical way or am I responding in an emotional way? And make sure that you balance the two out. So when I say that, at the 3 airlines that we've been at, every airline has their own rumors, right? Our first airline, it was always, oh, we're going to be the first airline to go under, or, oh, we're getting jets, and all kinds of rumors. And at the time, we were not flying jets at that first airline that we were at. But people would make decisions based on those rumors. And then they didn't end up happening. And I know a lot of people have, what we've been told and what we've heard lately, are making decisions at the wholly owns based on rumors. And if there's not concrete evidence that any of that's going on, I would not be making career moves and career decisions based on what you're hearing.
Sure.
So just keep that in mind.
So, and like Heather was saying, when it comes to the emotional versus the logical aspect of everything, pilots are people too, plain and simple. And when it comes to your career, we all have so much money, so much experience tied up in training and sitting in the cockpit that at the end of the day, just like everyone else, we want to feel wanted. So it's really hard for us to fall into that that circle of so-and-so wants me or this company wants me. And we just want to help kind of set the record straight a little bit, or maybe straighten the path to help use that logical side of you rather than the emotional to make you, or just help you make some wiser decisions and hopefully streamline your career path.
So a lot of the questions that we've been getting lately is, hey, should I accept a job offer to a low-cost carrier, to XYZ airline? And our answers will vary based on your experience.
Well, wait, that will help me get to where I want to go faster, right?
I mean, maybe not though.
It depends on where you are in your career.
Yeah. So let's use Piedmont for an example. Let's say that you're flying for Piedmont. Let's say maybe you're a captain of Piedmont and you're looking at your estimated flow time and you're like, oh, I really don't want to wait 2 years to flow, or whatever you think it might be to flow. So you make a move from Piedmont and you go to, let's say, Frontier. Well, you need to keep in mind that most, not all, but most pilots at Frontier are probably also trying to get to American and Delta and United and FedEx.
And UPS and everybody else that's out there.
So it's still competitive over there too. So are you really gaining anything by doing that? Sometimes you might. And we'll talk to some people and we might tell someone, hey, that might make sense for you. But for other people, we're going to say, yeah, that doesn't really make sense where you are. And I think that's where having really good mentors come into place. That's one reason why we do what we do. We always tell people, if you are facing a major decision in life, or especially in your career, go and find your mentors. And I mean, not just one, but multiple, even if they're not in aviation.
Absolutely.
Run the situation by them. And I always tell people, listen to what every mentor has to say. And I personally, I don't listen to any of my mentors 100%. I just don't. I will go and I'll ask 5 different people with 5 different experience levels the same question. I'll go and think about what they told me, and then I'm going to make my own decision based off the feedback they gave me. It'll help me make a decision, but I'm not going to listen to anyone 100%. So I think I always want to tell my clients to do the same thing. Listen to what people tell you, but at the end of the day, it's your decision, it's your career, and you need to make a decision that makes sense for you. What Johnny and Jane are doing may not be as good of a path or decision for you. Everyone's different. Everyone has a different path, a different story, and different experience levels too.
And this circles all the way back to what we said 5 minutes ago when it comes to the emotional versus the logic base, because this extends deep into your career. So you may go to Johnny or Timmy or Heather or whomever asking for career advice. And like Heather said, she's only going to take 70 to 90% of the information that they give. And then she's going to kind of feel her way through by asking a bunch of different mentors. And the reason for that is, just like you want to be wanted to go to another company, they're going to have some emotion tied up in giving you information. It doesn't matter who it is, whether you should call in sick on next Saturday's trip or what company you should go to. They're going to put a little bit of emotion into it because, well, maybe that's what they want to do too, or maybe that's not where they want you to go. So you have to kind of filter out that information just a little bit to make the best decision for you, because their decision might not be exactly what is best for you as well.
Yep. And you have to remember too, when people give you advice, their advice is shaped around their own experiences. So if I'm asking someone about buying a house, but they got burned back in 2008 and they're telling everyone, don't do it, it's a bad idea. Well, just because they had a bad experience in 2008 doesn't mean you're going to have a bad experience in today's market. So look at the market. That's something else I tell the clients, right? Look at the market. What is the pilot market doing right now? There are pilots that we've worked with who've gotten hired on at airlines who probably may not have been considered for employment 10 years ago, probably even 5 years ago.
Right.
But because of the market, there is that shortage looming, right? And so the market is what's going to drive a lot of this too. So keep that in mind.
Absolutely. So like we were talking earlier about, well, where are you in your career and what might be the best direction for you to go? We're always here as mentors for you. So if you have any questions, feel free to bounce those off of us.
Yep.
Like Heather said, there's a message board right there. We can see it direct. So we can always answer those at the end or throughout.
Yeah. And then something else too is we don't ever tell people what to do. I'm not in the business of doing that unless you're my husband.
Only 3 times so far today.
Anyway, so I don't tell people what to do. What I'll say is I'm going to tell you what your options are. We're going to talk through your options. And then I'll probably tell you, hey, if I were you, I would probably do X, Y, Z. And here's why. But I'm not going to tell you what to do. And sometimes some of you pilots will call us wanting help. And really, you don't want help. Really, you're just looking for someone else to agree with you or to verify, to reassure what you already thought or what you already believe. And that's okay too, but that's what we're here for.
Sure. So it's just a little confidence in an answer can really go a long way. So we're always here for that.
Yep. All right. So if all of you are thinking about flowing to American, let's talk a little bit about that. So when you flow to American, I don't know if you guys knew this, but any Piedmont, PSA, or Envoy pilot that gets hired on at American, either via the flow or outside the flow, you guys get a pretty nice 401k match percentage. And I don't know if you guys knew that, but you guys get it day one of employment. Every other new hire that comes to American has to wait an entire year to receive a company match percentage to their 401k.
All the way through the end of their probationary year, and not just their sign-on, but it's the end of their year. So for those that are at the 3 wholly owns right now that want to go to American Airlines, whether you flow through or you do it off the street, on day one, you begin accumulating 16% into your 401k. And you might be sitting there thinking, 16%, that's not very much. But in terms of a 401k, that's huge. And that's not accounting for anything that you may contribute on your own.
Right. Yep. So that's a huge deal. So I don't know if you guys knew about that, but that's another extra incentive if you're kind of on the edge of, should I flow? Should I not flow? What should I do? Something else we've noticed lately, United has been moving like crazy, picking up some of you wholly owned pilots. And they just made another push, inviting a bunch of you to take their leadership assessment. And if you're considering going to United, let me tell you a little story.
Well, maybe before we do that, so the leadership assessment, for if you're not sure what that is, it's essentially the Hogan exam.
Renamed.
New paint. That's it. And they stuck it right back out.
And they probably updated it. They probably updated it, but it's renamed. But it's called the Hogan is what it was called before. Let me make sure I'm getting this right. My notes here.
So I stepped all over you. So
you did step all over me.
I'm sorry.
What was I saying?
About.
Oh, I was going to tell a story.
Yeah, about
before
United
you rudely interrupted me.
That's what I'm here for.
All right. So our very first airline, which is where we met, by the way, our first airline flew and still flies for United. So United Express. And so that's all we knew starting out. So Heath and I both thought one day we're going to end up at United. That was our dream. We were so excited about it. Our airline only flew for United. So that's the only metal we were familiar with. I did some work with some of the United teams and, I went to their corporate office. We were both very familiar with the brand and we were so in love with the brand. And so many of our really good friends in the industry are at United. Some of my best friends in the industry are flying for United. So naturally, we just thought, someday we're going to end up there. And then kind of out of nowhere, things took a turn and American came. And we never expected American. I never in a million years would have thought that I would have gone and worked for American. Mm-hmm. And I was really nervous about it because I just always assumed that I'd either stay at Piedmont because I loved Piedmont. And that was my second airline that I worked for. Or I would probably get picked up at United at some point if that's what I thought would be a good career progression for myself. So when American came and spoke with me, I was really on edge about it because I didn't know much about American. I didn't have any friends there. All my friends were at United. And I'd have to move to Dallas. And I was like, oh my gosh, like we live in the Cleveland, Ohio area. Like that's a big deal. But we did it. And there are good people everywhere. There are great people at American. There are great pilots at American.
Absolutely.
But also at United. So my whole point in saying this, you may go your entire career thinking you're going to end up in one company or one airline. And this opportunity will come out of nowhere. And you know what? Sometimes you just got to take those opportunities and explore that because it could be the best decision you've ever made. And that's what it was for me. I really enjoyed my time getting to know some great people at American. So if you are considering another legacy airline, and that's the thing that kind of sucks is a lot of you, American is your number one, but maybe you're getting a phone call from United or Delta, Southwest, whoever, right? And you're really on the fence about it because you only ever saw yourself going to American. So I would say, Heath and I always say, what do you want? What do you want? Because if American's really where you want to be, going to United is probably not going to expedite that. But I would say keep your options open though, because you might go to United or Delta or Southwest or FedEx and freaking love it. What do you think?
No, I think that's spot on. It doesn't matter what company you go to. It's all going to be really, how do you want the ride to be? You're going to find great people in every company, and you're going to find bad people in every company as well, just like the regionals that you're at. So if you really want to go to American, that's probably what you should hold out for, in my opinion. For those that are at the Three Holy Owns, that are part of the flow, you guys have a golden ticket in your hand.
That's huge. That is huge. You're not gonna have that guarantee for American anywhere else.
No, which kind of leads us to, well, if everybody wants to feel wanted again, so what if the low-cost carriers, the ultra low-cost carriers start calling? Well, do you think if I go to a Frontier that I'm going to get to American any faster if I only have 1.5 years left in my flow?
All right, well, let's tell them another story.
Oh, we want to save that one for later.
Let's tell the story. I have to laugh now because it's so funny. When we were at our first airline and you went to your first major airline interview. You remember that?
I do.
And we thought we made it so big.
So I was at my first regional, well, I was a captain at my first regional airline. And just like everybody else, I wanted to be wanted by a company. I wanted to move my career faster than what I thought I should have been doing, or faster than what I was doing. So because I was part of the recruiting team, I was able to go out on the road. I was able to stand behind the booth and look sharp in my uniform and meet people. And while I was there, should I use the name? Should we? It doesn't really matter.
It doesn't. You can if you want. It doesn't matter at this point.
While we were there, the table next to us, we just happened to have small conversation back and forth with a major airline that was next to us. And at the end of the day, the guy comes over and he goes, "Hey, here's my card. Why don't you shoot your resume and application down to us, and let's see what happens."
And we were freaking out.
And I couldn't believe it. I thought, this is it. I've hit the big time.
It was like we won the lottery or something.
I might be able to fly a 757 somewhere.
Yeah, it was. We were so excited. And for this interview, he went to the interview. So he applied. They called him for the interview because I think it was the chief pilot that we met.
It was the chief pilot.
That was at the event, he was super nice. Very, very nice. So you went to the interview, and at this interview back then, we had to fly you out. They did not provide flights. They didn't provide transportation, shuttles, hotels, nothing. So we put you on an airplane. Mm-hmm. We got you a hotel. We got you a rental car.
You had to buy my shoes.
You had to buy a suit because you didn't own a suit.
I didn't have a suit at the time.
Yeah.
So I went all the way out and I sat through the interview. And
you had to do a sim ride too.
I did have to do a sim ride.
It was intense.
This is the last place I really had to do a sim ride for an interview.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of little flubs here and there, but I came home that night. I thought I had done well. And within 48 hours to 72 hours, the phone calls start coming in saying, "Hey, we want you to come work for us." And we happened to be sitting in a little pub in Cleveland, and you would have thought that the Indians had just won the World Series at our table because we went nuts.
We were like, "Oh my gosh, our life has changed forever." But then we're like, "But wait, is this a distraction?" Because it feels good to be wanted, you know? So we're like, is this a distraction, or should we really be making this move? Because we would have to move, and the way this airline was structured and was mostly, I believe, day trips.
Day trips in Florida.
Yes.
Yep.
So we'd have to move again from Ohio to Florida and then do this day trip life kind of thing. So we're like, oh man, do we want to go to Florida? I don't know. But we were so excited that he got the job. So now we're like, does he take the job? And of course, everyone at our first regional airline is like trying to get out and go anywhere because there's like little to no movement back then, right?
And they're all saying, take the job. What are you waiting for?
But what'd you do?
You know, we talked to our mentors, the people that we trusted most. We sat down, we talked about it with each other. And after 2-3 days of really just kicking it around, I passed. I said, I think I want to stay where I'm at. I really, really appreciate the opportunity. I don't want to slam the door on this company because someday you might be all that calls. So I had to respectfully decline the opportunity. And it ended up being a slingshot that kind of led me to where we are today, because I had to pass through another regional. I even tried 91 and 135, and that road led me to American. But had I taken that, we would probably live in Florida. This hair wouldn't look near as good as it does because it just doesn't hold up in humidity. But I would probably still be there. We try to tell people that if you're looking to go to another carrier, that you really should consider the fact that you might have to spend a decade, 8, 10, 12 years at that airline before you get picked up by somebody else. And had we made that jump, we'd still live in Florida.
Yeah. So I guess it's just an example of, it feels good to be wanted, but is it a distraction? Or is it where you really want to be? Is it going to get you where you want to go faster? And some people might have taken the job offer and loved life and everything would have been great. I don't know. But would we end up where we are today if you did? Probably not. Probably not.
I would either want to stay there or go to another carrier that was similar in its structure.
Yep. All right, Gabriel. Hey guys, do you think AA will start targeting United regional pilots like United is with AA wholly owns and put AA wholly owns applications last? I think that could be a strategy move. I could see that happening, but I don't think they would necessarily make that a goal of theirs to do. I think when they look at the application database, so as of my notes in June of this last year, American said that they had approximately 10,000 applications on file, okay? Out of those 10,000 applications, 1/3 of those are viewed as competitive. So 3,333 or so, right? That's a lot of people viewed as competitive. So I think this is where they kind of have to balance the line of, yes, it's good to hire outside the flow, but realistically with any parent company, you can't bleed dry your, the baby brother companies, right?
Can't kick the legs out from underneath of you.
Yeah, so they need the wholly owns. And last I checked, the wholly owns actually made the most money across the board, because you guys are, they're great operations. So they can't afford to hire all of you outside the flow, right? So there does have to be some balancing act there. So yeah, it is a possibility they could be looking more at United regionals, but I don't think they would target them. I think they would target more military. I think they would be looking like that, what is it? That Rotary to Airline Group. I know that American's going to be there next month, and they're doing a heavy push supporting veterans, and they always have. That's nothing new. They've always been supporting veterans, right? I think if they're going to target anybody, it's going to be continue targeting military. But I will say too, in this industry, things change so fast. So their strategy today could change 3 months from now. So when I was at American, that is one way that we would keep the selection pool diversified. So we would change what we're looking for every few months. So this month we're looking for these 3 things. And then 2 or 3 months down the road, we change the parameters and we filter out those 3,000 applicants to look for different things. And that's how you keep it diversified.
Right. So, and I agree with Heather on this one. I don't think they would necessarily be targeting the small carriers or the regional carriers for Uniteds, the Deltas, that kind of thing. When I came through in my new hire class, about 50% of us came from the military. Of that was left, it was somewhere around 75% was from the flow. So 50% from the military. It was probably between 25 and 40% came from the flow. And of all of the new hires that came through, I was in a group of 42. There were only 3 of us that were hired off the street, outside of the flow. So it's already a very slim number that comes off the street. Not to say don't try, absolutely try. But I don't think they would necessarily be targeting the UAL and the DAL regional carriers.
Yeah. Alexander, what makes a competitive applicant for AA? Is there any chance for the flow increasing? Okay, that's an interesting question. So here's a way to look at it. This is what I tell a lot of my clients. So instead of asking, when you go and you speak to American or you're in front of a hiring manager or recruiter, don't ask them, am I competitive? Because that's relative. You probably are competitive in some capacity, right? I would ask, what are sorry, I'm flubbering a little bit right now.
What do the other applicants look like in comparison to me?
The people getting hired today.
Right.
So the last new hire class that got hired off the street, what did they have that made them competitive, and measure yourself up against them? So it's hard to tell what they view as competitive because they did not outline that in their last briefing. I have my notes here. I'm looking over just to make sure. I do know American has always valued what they call leadership cockpit experience, and that equates to turbine PIC time. So especially 121 PIC is pure gold. And that's why a lot of the wholly owned pilots that are captains leaving to go and take a first officer job somewhere else, I would say unless you had a very special circumstance, I would not be doing that if American's your goal, because you are missing that PIC time. And PIC time at American is gold. And you have to remember too, what American views as competitive or more competitive will be a little bit different than United and Delta. I've heard of a few first officers. I can't talk. I've heard of a few first officers getting hired on at United. I have not heard that at American. And when I was hired at American, I never ever saw that happen either, because they are so big on leadership experience, especially in the cockpit. So PIC time for sure. Let me go over my notes real quick.
So while you're doing that, American Airlines, they believe in, they don't want forever FOs. They simply do not want to hire someone that they think is going to move into a narrow body or a wide body right seat and stay there. So if they kind of get that hint, they're going to avoid you. So like Heather was saying, they're looking for people that are actively trying to improve their career, whether that be through 121 turbine PIC, through recruiting or the hiring department or different things like that. And at the end of the day, if you're accumulating that 121 turbine PIC, that's a tongue twister. That's a lot.
I know. I was struggling.
If you're getting that at one of the wholly owns, remember that, I'm going to say this 20 times, you've got a golden ticket in your pocket. All you've got to do is simply,
if you want it,
be patient if you want it, right?
So on that same note, Heath, so in terms of competitiveness, showing some career progression. So I always tell people, first and foremost, you're a pilot. You are applying for a pilot position, so you need to be flying the airplane, okay? Once you get at least 1,000 hours of turbine PIP time at your airline, that's when you can start looking at other venues in that same company. So if you want to go be a chief pilot, if you want to go in the training department,
check airman. Yep.
Check airman, exactly. That's when you can look in to start doing those things. What some people do as a mistake, in my opinion, they will start doing those before they get that 1,000 hours of turbine PIC time. And so they're not as competitive as a pilot. In management, you might be, but you're not applying for a management position with legacies. You're applying to be a pilot. So don't get sidetracked. And then when you do go and become a check airman, a chief pilot, whatever it is you want to do, don't forget to keep flying.
Keep flying the line. So
to stay competitive, especially for American, they're looking for you to fly a certain number of hours in a rolling 12 months. And I'm assuming they're going to make some sort of some exceptions because of COVID. But when I was there, historically, we always looked to make sure that you were flying at least 300 hours in the past 12 months, which is why a lot of corporate guys and girls don't make it on, because a lot of 135, 91K, they don't break 300 hours in a year. Yeah. So I would say stay consistent with your flying. get that leadership cockpit experience. But another aspect, and that will determine whether or not you're competitive or not, is whether or not you're going to fit in the culture. And that is going to be within the new pilot skills test, where they merge the organizational fit assessment and the pilot skills test in the one test. So they are seeing, are you a good stick? And are you going to fit in our company culture? And that's something that you and I both won't know. So if you start interview prepping, I don't know what your score was. I don't know if you're a good fit culturally. But they're going to take your score of those assessments, and they will use that to determine whether or not you are as competitive as the next guy or girl, if that makes sense.
So, and always remember, at the end of the day, or I suppose for this example, the end of the week or the month, competitive is relative. It all depends on how many people are applying for that company.
Yep.
If the numbers begin to decrease for American, well, you may be more competitive, or you may come up in a higher standard,
right?
Because there are fewer applications for them to dig through, and vice versa. If the applications go up, or the quality of the candidates begin to rise, and there's no way for anyone to know that, then you'll just get reshuffled into the queue.
Yep. Okay, Gabriel, what are common mistakes on applications did you see? Spelling.
Oh good.
My gosh.
Good golly.
Spelling, grammar issues, incomplete sentences. So there are times to abbreviate and times when you don't abbreviate. And when you are using applications and you're applying for a job, you want to try and use full, complete sentences if you can. Because when you're abbreviating, you just look lazy. You do. It looks lazy and it looks sloppy. So I would say incomplete applications. So if you don't complete the addendum, if you don't complete the pilot skills test or some sort of culture fit assessment, if you have spelling errors, if you have a lot of gaps in your employment history, in your housing, your address history, all of that. So your application tells a story, and you want to make sure that from beginning to end, it is a fluid story with no holes, no gaps. You never, ever, ever want a recruiter or a hiring manager to make their own assumptions when it comes to your experience and your application or resume. So you got to fill in the blanks, and you've got to control your own story. What story are you telling?
Absolutely. Your career is a book. So what you want to do is make that book as fluid and as detailed as you can, because if you leave out a chapter or you leave out something, the recruiter is going to have to make up the gaps on their own. They're going to make a decision on, well, who are you where I can't see you in your application? And they may simply just bypass because there's enough information that's missing. And like Heather was saying, when it comes to your housing or your education or your career history, always make sure that you line it all up. Make a nice timeline that goes all the way through. Even if you're sitting at one of the wholly owns right now and your work history, you want to have at least 10 years there. If you're going back into school or potentially into high school, put it down. Let them know where you were, what you were doing, so there's no gaps that are in there. So they look at that and go, well, where was this guy for the last year and a half in here? We don't know.
And if you're unsure about something, just put it in. I'd rather you have it there than not have it there and they start asking questions. You don't want them asking questions. You don't want anyone to ever look at your application and walk away with more questions than they have answers.
But seriously, in today's day and age, computers, cell phones, iPads, all the technology we have out there, Grammarly can be your best friend.
Yeah.
Like Heather said in the beginning, spelling and incomplete sentences, it will most definitely get your application bounced out of the system if you use there, or there in the wrong format. Yeah, that's just simply Grammarly and iron that out.
Okay, how many internal recs do new hires at A have? If only a third of the applicants in the A application pool are competitive, what makes the other 2/3 not competitive? No degree. Okay, so how many internal recs do people have? Okay, well, here's the thing. It doesn't always matter on the number. Sometimes it matters on the quality of rec. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you have 3 internal letters of recommendation on file, and they are 3 first officers at American. They're all first year. They're not off probation yet, okay? And maybe you knew them in college or flew with them. I don't know. Or let's say that you have 1 letter of recommendation from an American Airlines captain who is currently a chief pilot. What do you think weighs more? You may have more from the newer first officers, but because that captain has been at the company longer, they have a proven track record of the success in the company. That's going to weigh more than your 3 letters from your first officers who are still on probation. So it really,
Absolutely.
it's a balancing act. It depends. It depends on the quality of letters. I will say we read every single recommendation letter that came through. So when we're reading those letters, don't have someone say, oh, I like Alex. Alex is a great pilot. Please hire him. You know what I mean? Like, the letter needs to be quality. It needs to have some substance to it.
Sure.
And that will determine like how much weight do they put on it. So I wouldn't focus so much on a number. And I know so many of you always ask, what's the magic number? There really is no magic number. They always say quality over quantity.
Absolutely.
Because they look and see, well, who is writing you a letter of recommendation?
So like Heather was saying, it's all quality over quantity. Now, obviously, if you don't know anyone at American Airlines, or you don't know anyone that's been there for a considerable amount of time, use those 3 FOs, because something is better than nothing when it comes to that.
And those are still worth something, by the way. But
Sure.
I'm just giving you an example of how it might be weighted, you know?
Sure. And just, you can use the example of who are you going to believe more, a captain or a first officer? If they've been at that company longer and they have a solid track record that they are not a quote unquote problem child within the company, that one's going to carry a little bit more weight than someone that is either brand new and untested, or someone that might get called into the chief pilot's office every now and then, that they'll have a little bit more weight to them. So yeah, it's quality over quantity. So if those are all you have, use them. So just keep in mind when it comes to this, when it's quality over quantity, that when you submit or have someone submit a letter of recommendation for you, make sure you know who they are and not just how long they've been within a company, because depending on what they put in that letter can be the make or break at your career, at least getting to American faster, because they have the opportunity to write a negative letter and then drop that onto your application. And once it's there, it's stuck there. There's nothing you can do to have it removed.
Okay. So what makes the other 2/3 not competitive? No degree. So I would say probably, the college degree. So they do not require a bachelor's degree. However, it is recommended. So people who do not have the 4-year degree naturally will not be viewed as competitive as those who do, right? So I would say people who don't have a college degree, I would say people that have a certain number of check ride failures on their record. Some companies do have a cutoff number. Like if you have more than, let's just throw a number out there as an example. If you have more than 4, you can't get hired at a certain airline unless you get approval from a chief pilot, director of training, certain people in management. So check ride failures could hurt you, especially if you're not providing in detail what happened, aircraft accidents, incidents, violations, background issues,
speeding tickets,
DUIs. I would also say who you are when you think no one's watching and no one's looking.
That is huge.
So when you're at the airport and you think no one's paying attention to you, but you're in uniform and someone sees you say something or do something, and they may know someone in pilot selection, pilot hiring, pilot recruiting, and that could impact you, and you will never know. You'll never know. They're not going to send you an email and say, hey, Bob, we saw you in Charlotte, and we're really disappointed in you because you did this. Nope, you'll never know. And you'll be moved to a folder or a file in the system we're not interested in you, and you may never know.
And it really could be the most, I don't want to call it the most mundane thing, but like Heather said, who are you when you think no one is looking?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, one of the most dangerous phrases that can be used in our career is, it's not my job. Whether that comes to just helping get the aircraft prepped, moving passengers in the right direction. Occasionally, it might even come down to just getting a wheelchair so a passenger can sit down on the jet bridge rather than wait on the airplane. It's those little details that help polish who you are, because on the flip side of who's paying attention when you don't think anyone's watching, that could also make your career. If you happen to go that extra little step to push a wheelchair if needed up a jet bridge, or to make sure that a flight attendant is taken care of, or a first class passenger, that first class passenger may be in management at the company you're trying to get hired at.
Yep. And we've seen stories like that happen before too. I mean, there have been some crazy, crazy stuff that I've seen where people get hired on for crazy reasons, like things that you would never even think of. Anything is possible, and you never know who's watching, who's paying attention. So that could impact you too. Gabriel, no, there's not a minimum letter of recommendations that catches their eye. How do they look at your logbooks during the interview? Is it okay if you have mistakes as long as you can explain it? Okay,
right.
So this may change a little bit because COVID happened, right? And so COVID changed a lot when it came to pilot selection, pilot hiring, recruiting, the interview process. Prior to COVID, I'll tell you my experience with it. Back then, it was a 2-day interview process. And when you came in on day one is when you would give all of your documents, all of your logbooks, all of your paperwork. And your logbooks would stay in the office overnight while we had a line pilot come in and review your logbooks before your interview that began the following day. So we had 1 or 2 pilots come in and review logbooks, and they go through by hand every logbook you have, looking and verifying for every check ride, every type rating, certification. And then they're going to go on the very back of your logbook too, in endorsements, and they're going to look for some 6149s and see if those are there.
They're going to cross-check your check rides versus how many are in the front of your book versus the back of the book. Because a lot of guys, unless you were an instructor for a while or had some students that failed somewhere, you might not be aware that, well, you have to have an additional endorsement in the back of your logbook to retest. Retest after a failure.
Yep.
And a lot of guys would try to sneak that through, and they're like, no, what are you talking about? I don't have any check ride failures. Well,
and then we would find them.
You only get that endorsement on if you had failed somewhere.
Correct.
So they will dig through that line by line and make sure what's going on. Does it all really jive? So you're asking, is it okay to have mistakes as long as you can explain it?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're a person as much as I'm a person. So my paper logbooks, they have mistakes in there. They're a little bit beat up. That's okay. But as long as you can make the corrections, or you have something certifying a correction, you'll be fine. That's okay.
Yep, that's fine.
And when it comes to those logbooks, while Heather's digging down through, I'll just give another little story. So I carried all of my logbooks to my interview, everything. I carried my digital logbook, I carried my paper logbooks, and I really kind of go out of my way to make sure that those logbooks are cared for, because that's a record of my career and what I've done and where I've gone. So
and he was being interviewed outside the flow. So we're like, we're not going to mess this up.
Don't blow it.
We're like, we better make sure we dot every I, cross every T. Like we were on top of it.
Sure. We did it all. So I carried in my paper logbooks. They're in envelopes with tabs on them that say, where in the series does this book fall? They went through that. I know they opened up those paper logbooks, even though I gave them a full copy of my digital logbook, a printed copy of my full digital logbook. They still went through the paper books. And the next day when I got my books back, I remember them saying, hey, I knew that this interview was going to go pretty smoothly just because of the condition of your books, the detail that you put into it to make sure everything was fine. And a year later, when I was going back through a recurrent training, I happened to be walking through the hallway, I was sitting there, I was studying, and this woman approached me and she goes, "Hey, is your name Heath?" I go, "Yeah." She goes, "I knew I recognized you. I did your logbooks, and I knew you were going to get hired just by reviewing your logbooks, that you were really going to have to do a bonehead thing in your sit down to lose the job."
Because he showed up prepared and he was taking it seriously. And all that translates in your paperwork, your application, your logbooks. Like, you're setting the tone for the interview with your paperwork. So
Absolutely.
keep that in mind.
So
speaking of logbooks, can your digital logbook replace your paper logbook? So yes, however, you still need to bring your paper logbooks with you to any interview.
absolutely.
But digital is always better anyways, especially when you're having to review logbooks and you're spending hours and that's all you're doing all day is looking over people's logbooks. Making it digital is so much easier for people to read, comprehend, all that stuff. And before I forget, real quick, they also check when they do logbook reviews, they're checking to make sure your flight time matches what was disclosed on your application and or your resume. So make sure those numbers match.
So it really, this is where Heather and I may split a little bit. So when it comes to the logbooks, Heather is a digital person. She likes to have documents, things backed up.
Because it's clean.
She likes to have things on the computer. She likes digital format. I, on the other hand, I still keep a digital logbook. I put every leg that I've flown, but I'm a paper guy. When I go through and I look at things, I like paper. I like to mark things up. I just like to take care of it that way. So I still take my digital logbook. It might be a little overkill. I still print it once a year. I take my digital logbook, I print it, I put it in the binder that I've been carrying around for the last 7 years, and I put it back in the safe, and that's where it sits, just in case that digital copy goes missing or a file becomes corrupt or something.
And you printed out your entire digital logbook for your interviews, I remember.
From my first flight to current, I've printed off everything, and it goes back into the safe as soon as everything's done. So, and when it comes to those digital logbooks, I imagine that you're all pretty aware of this. If you're going to back up multiple copies and try to put them in different places. Leave one on your laptop, put one in your email or Google Drive or something, just in case that laptop goes missing. You drop your phone in a puddle, so if something happens, you've got backups so your logs aren't completely gone.
Yep. All right. What other questions do you guys have? I'm trying to make sure we covered everything that I wanted to cover today.
Logbooks are a great question.
Yes, it is. I think I got everything on my end.
Did we get it all?
I think so. What's on my board over there? Did I get everything?
Rumors. Should I accept the first thing? Yeah, I think you did pretty good.
Okay. And I don't see any other questions coming through. Sure I didn't miss anything. All right, cool. Okay. Well, I guess we'll call it quits here, guys. Let us know if this was helpful at all. Like Heath was saying, I do think we'd like to do this more often and just put those questions that we're getting out there for more people to listen to what feedback we have. If you have more questions afterwards, let us know. We'll be more than happy to help you and give us our input and our 2 cents, and hopefully that'll help a little bit.
Absolutely. No, I think that's it. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for submitting your questions. We hope you guys, if you happen to see there's another stream coming up, tune back in. We want to hear from you. If you have any questions outside of this stream, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help.
One more thing before I forget. Alex was asking a question about the competitive people in the system. One thing, too, that could make you not show up as competitive is if you're not updating your application enough. So if you're not updating it, let's say you're only updating once every 90 days, then they're going to assume that you're no longer interested, and they're just going to like move you to another folder or another file, or they may not even look at you because they assume you're not interested.
Yep.
You could have been hired on at a competitor for all they know. So I always tell people, update at least once a month, but make it a habit. Every payday, just go in there when you're paying your bills and update your application and make sure that your flight time is good to go, and you'll be fine.
Sure. Because
sorry, I wanted to put that in there before I forgot.
That was a great point, because like Heather was saying, they'll move you to another folder, and depending on the system, depending on the company for applications, once you get moved out of that updated applications folder and you get put into do not or is not interested, or we don't know what's going on, your application doesn't show up in the updates anymore. So you may really be interested, but if you've gone 2 months, 3 months, 6 months without updating your application, they may move you over and you'll never know what happened to your application. It'll just stay in limbo.
Yep.
So.
But thanks, you guys, for hanging out with us for a little bit. If you think of anything else, shoot us an email. My email is heather@aviatormentor.com. Always feel free to shoot me an email. I check it every single day, multiple times a day.
Multiple times a day. It drives me insane.
So if you need anything, let us know. And until then, we will catch you next time.
Well, hey,
Thanks.
don't end it, because hey, you get to put yours out there. So if you need mine, it's really easy. It's Heath at Aviator Mentor. And
pilots don't check emails.
Heather will check my email.
Yeah, I probably will.
But anyhow, thanks for tuning in. We hope to hear from you guys, and
yep,
we'll do this again sometime soon.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.